They opened the attic by prying a hatch that stuck like damp bark to wood. Dust roared in the beam of a borrowed torch and found a crate wrapped in stiff burlap. Inside lay a human face made of wax, with real lashes, glass eyes clouded as if remembering rain. The label had peeled to a single letter, yet the lips were tinted with the care given to a patient, not a prop. They lifted the head into a glass case and recorded its succession like any forgotten specimen. One of them joked about donors, while another noted a faint, briny smell. Then a shine gathered at the left eye, and a bead formed, quick as breath. It slipped down the cheek and left a clean track through the dust, a tear that salt tested true, and a problem that history had already written down. The finding would be filed as a routine retrieval. Until that tear, it is a true case from institutional records, preserved in a ledger begun in 1874 and reopened in 1993 within the Viremont Hill Medical Faculty at the Eldermeyer Quarter. In the mid-19th century, medicine was still clawing its way from the shadows of superstition. Lecture halls across Europe were crowded with students who craned to see. Yet cadavers were scarce and decomposed quickly. Into that shortage stepped a curious craft, anatomical wax modeling. From Florence to Paris, artisans trained in sculpture lent their hands to science. They molded muscles, blood vessels, and organs with astonishing fidelity, so a single model could be studied by generations without decay. Unlike skeletons, these wax pieces seemed to hold life in suspension. Paris had several such workshops, often tucked into side streets near medical schools. A visitor stepping through their doors might hear the hiss of heated wax, smell resins, and see glass eyes laid in trays like marbles. Human hair, carefully stitched or glued one strand at a time, gave the figures unsettling realism. Some were full bodies dissected in stages. Others, more portable, were heads or limbs. The head found in 1993 belonged to this lineage. A journal, preserved in the faculty archives, dated 1874, mentions a craftsman named Arnaud Delacroix. Not a physician, but a modeler, hired to translate flesh into wax. His notes are methodical, listing pigments, oils, and suppliers. Yet between those practical lines lies a sentence written in softer ink. She watched me for weeks, even after I was done. No explanation follows. Scholars argue whether it referred to a patient once studied, or to the uncanny effect of the wax figure itself. To understand his comment, imagine his life. Delacroix worked in dim light, a coal stove at his back, shaping wax softened to the warmth of skin. He was required to reproduce not only the anatomy but the features of the patient who had supplied the specimen. Faces in wax were not anonymous. They carried the lines, lashes, and brows of the person once alive. It was science, but also memorial, a preservation the families never requested. The modeler became both artist and embalmer. By the 1870 seconds, Parisian society had mixed feelings about these objects. Students praised their clarity, yet outsiders whispered of blasphemy, of art stolen from the dead. Some clergymen protested, while collectors treated them like curiosities. Rumors spread of models that seemed to change expression or retain the warmth of the corpse they copied. The line between tool and effigy blurred. Fast forward to 1993. The Faculty of Medicine, long moved to modern facilities, had left its attic sealed. A group of graduate students were assigned to inventory what remained. Pushing aside broken chairs and moth-eaten drapes, they stumbled upon the crate. The burlap disintegrated in their hands, revealing the wax head inside. Despite a century of neglect, it was strangely intact. Dust had coated the surface, but the glass eyes retained a glossy depth. One of the students, recalling old exhibits, noted how unusually lifelike this one appeared. They brought it downstairs, careful, as if handling a skull. In the lab light, the lashes showed their original curl, and faint pigment clung to the lips. It was neither grotesque nor grotesquely artificial. Rather, it seemed to wait. When the accession record was filled, they cited 1874 anatomical model, origin Paris, and placed it in a temporary display case. From that moment, its story entered a new century. What had been a didactic tool now confronted modern viewers not as specimen, but as relic, bridging the distance between past and present. The stage was set for the incident that would puzzle both science and superstition, the tear that should not have been. When the head was first displayed in the teaching hall, it was not meant to attract notice. Dozens of other remnants had been catalogued in the same week: medical diagrams, worn scalpels, cracked glass slides. Yet within days, whispers spread among the staff. One student claimed that while passing the case at night, he noticed a streak across the cheek. Another swore he had seen a droplet gather, though the room was dry and locked. The phenomenon was recorded more carefully a week later. A custodian inspecting the case saw fluid clinging to the lower eyelid. She dabbed it with a cloth. The bead smeared clear, but left a faint crust as it dried. When tested, the residue showed sodium chloride, the same element found in human tears. For a wax model sealed for over a century, such leakage seemed impossible. Speculation began with mundane causes. Perhaps condensation? Yet the building's climate was controlled, and no other models exhibited similar behavior. Was it a residue from old cleaning agents? Laboratory staff searched the archives and found no mention of treatments that would weep salt water. Attention returned to the journal of Arnaud Delacroix. Among his notes was a recipe using a mixture of beeswax, resin, and carnauba, with occasional additives of animal fat to mimic skin pliability. None could explain briny exudate. Still, tucked between formulas were lines that unsettled readers. The eyes refuse dullness. They swell as if glass were moist. I must dry them, yet they glisten again. Written in 1874, it paralleled what the custodians now observed. Students began to visit the case not for study but for fascination. Some tapped the glass, daring each other to stare into the model's pupils. The head had been sculpted with such precision that under certain angles, the gaze seemed to shift. Laughter often ended in silence when someone thought they saw the lashes quiver. Though no motion was ever proven, the psychological weight grew. At faculty meetings, debate intensified. Professors dismissed the accounts, urging focus on proper research. Yet quietly, one microbiologist requested samples of the tear crust. Under microscope, she noted crystalline structures resembling natural human secretions. Her report remained inconclusive, but her private diary, later shared, revealed her unease. If composition matches tears, then the wax contains what it should not. Whence comes the water, the salt? In parallel, more of Delacroix's notes surfaced. They hinted he works not from imagination, but from a particular subject, a young woman who had died of pulmonary infection. He wrote of her uncommon lashes, and the way her eyes glimmered even in repose. He confessed difficulty separating the study from the person. She lingers in wax more faithfully than in soil, he wrote. This implied that the model was not generic anatomy, but a near portrait. The idea unsettled the students who kept watch during late hours. Some began reporting auditory impressions, the scrape of wood, a soft sigh near the case. One student described hearing a drip, though no water source existed. Another wrote anonymously to the student paper that the relic breathes. Such claims were easily dismissed, yet they contributed to the atmosphere of dread. Photographs were taken for documentation. In several, the eyes reflected light in a way that suggested wetness, though skeptics argued it was glare. Yet in one print, later circulated in whispers, a definite streak traced down the left cheek. Whether artifact of the film or evidence, it aligned with earlier accounts. The faculty faced a dilemma. To deny the phenomenon risked fueling rumors. To acknowledge it invited ridicule from peers. Thus, the head remained in the case, lights dimmed, plaque unadorned. But word had already reached beyond the institution. Occult enthusiasts contacted the students, claiming wax effigies often held fragments of soul. Newspapers ignored the matter, But within underground circles, the weeping head became a whispered phrase. Meanwhile, the custodian who first touched the tear reported unsettling dreams. She described standing in an old workshop with walls stained by smoke and a man bending over a stove of melting wax. On the table lay the form of a woman's head, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. In the dream, the eyes followed her. She woke with the impression of salt on her skin. Scientific voices insisted on chemical explanations. Perhaps the wax had absorbed ambient moisture, releasing it as droplets when warmed by display lights. Perhaps salts used in old pigments leached outward. Yet each theory faltered. The tear appeared irregularly, not under consistent conditions, and only from one eye. What made matters worse was timing. On the anniversary of the young woman's death, as noted in Delacroix's notes, a clear droplet was again seen. 3 students witnessed it simultaneously. They documented the event with a camcorder, capturing faint shimmer rolling downward. Though quality was poor, the recording reinforced belief that coincidence alone could not explain it. As weeks passed, tension mounted. Some demanded the head be removed. Others insisted on further study. The atmosphere in the hall grew oppressive. Whispers of "she is watching" circulated. What had begun as curiosity now hardened into dread. The escalation reached a threshold when one evening an alarm was triggered. Security found no intruder, only the glass case ajar. Inside, the head remained, but the streak upon the cheek was unmistakably fresh. The record noted no source of entry, no tampering. The implication was left unspoken. The relic itself had moved. This chain of incidents, tears, notes, dreams, recordings, alarms, layered upon each other until coincidence could no longer contain them. The wax head was no longer an artifact among many. It was a focal point, a knot of memory and fear, pressing the faculty toward a confrontation with its origin and with the man who had once written that the figure continued to watch in long after the work was complete. The faculty could no longer ignore the unease. A special committee was formed. 3 professors, 2 graduate students, and 1 conservator. Their task was simple: observe the head under controlled conditions and end the speculation. The case was wheeled into a locked seminar room, the lights adjusted, and a camera set to record overnight. On the first night, nothing. The head sat inert, its lashes casting faint shadows. But on the second night, at 2:13 a.m., the camera captured a minute reflection on the left eye. By 2:16, a droplet had gathered, descending slowly along the cheek. The film showed no shift in temperature, no change in humidity, no source of condensation. When replayed to the committee, silence filled the room. One professor dismissed it as artifact, perhaps a smear on the lens. Yet when the case was opened, the salt trail remained. The conservator traced it with gloved finger and noted the residue, crystalline, granular. She whispered that it was not unlike a mourner's stain. The committee turned again to Delacroix's notes. Pages previously overlooked described the subject of his model in more detail. A young seamstress, unnamed, who died of consumption. He wrote of her family's inability to afford burial, of how the body was surrendered for study. He confessed discomfort at preserving her likeness. I give her glass eyes, yet they glimmer as hers did. She does not yield. I labor, and she endures. The tone grew fevered, suggesting an artist consumed by the presence of his subject. Rumor spread that Delacroix had refused further commissions after 1874. Some claimed he abandoned Paris altogether, his workshop shuttered overnight. A fragmentary obituary suggests he died alone, his tools found rusted, his molds smashed. If true, the head may have been his final piece. As these findings circulated, activity around the relic intensified. More witnesses reported the tear, now appearing at irregular intervals, sometimes twice in a week. The committee tried sealing the case with desiccant packs. Still, the moisture formed. One evening, a graduate assistant swore he saw the eyes fog briefly, as if breath had warmed the glass. The turning point came during a late-night observation. Two students monitored the case, while professors prepared instruments in the adjacent lab. At precisely 1:47 a.m., they heard a faint tapping. The sound repeated 3 knocks against the glass. Rushing to the display, they found the head unchanged, but the droplet already forming. Terrified, one student muttered that it was not the wax but the woman herself, insisting on recognition. Later analysis revealed an unsettling coincidence. The dates of increased activity matched entries in Delacroix's journal, anniversaries of his work sessions. It was as if the head was retracing the rhythm of its own creation. The climax reached its height when the conservator, against instruction, decided to clean the face thoroughly. As she brushed the lashes with a fine swab, the left eye released not one tear but several, streaming down both cheeks. Witnesses froze. The room grew unbearably still. Then one droplet struck the conservator's wrist. She recoiled, shouting that it burned cold. Others confirmed the sensation of chill, unnatural, in a heated room. The event fractured the committee. Some demanded the head be destroyed, fearing contamination or curse. Others urged preservation, seeing it as a singular phenomenon worth study. In the chaos, the relic became both relic and threat. The conservator resigned the next day, leaving behind a note, "It is not wax, it is witness." After this, the faculty made a final decision. The head was to be removed from display entirely, placed back in storage. Yet even then, the night it was carried to the archive vault, the students reported feeling watched from the crate. One swore he heard a sigh, escaped the burlap folds. They did not linger. The climax leaves no neat resolution. What was once a teaching tool had become a presence that unsettled every rational explanation. The tears were real, the notes undeniable, the witnesses too many. Whether science failed or something older persisted, the truth pressed inescapably. The wax head was not merely a model, but a vessel that still remembered. After the final incident, the faculty convened behind closed doors. Officially, their report stated that the wax head was chemically unstable and required removal from exhibition for conservation. Unofficially, those who had witnessed the tears knew the decision came from fear. The artifact was placed back into a wooden crate, lined with archival foam, sealed with tape, and locked in the climate-controlled vault beneath the building. No photographs of the removal were ever released. In the months that followed, conversation about the relic became hushed. Students who had once gathered to whisper about the weeping head now avoided the topic. The conservator's resignation letter circulated in photocopies. Its single phrase, "It is not wax, it is witness," turning into a kind of epigraph whispered in the corridors. Some called it hysteria. Others claimed it was evidence of conscience surviving in matter. The dream of the custodian recurred in fragments to other staff. Each described the same dim workshop, the same man at the stove, the same gaze of eyes that should not move. Whether shared memory or suggestion, it suggested a lingering echo. The wax head, though sealed away, seemed to project itself into thought. Archival researchers tried to trace the woman Delacroix described. Census records hint at a seamstress named Elise, who died in 1874 at age 22. Her burial was never recorded. If her body had indeed been surrendered to the faculty, then her likeness lived longer in wax than in memory. The model thus became a surrogate grave, a place where grief had no family to tend it. Could the tears be less a miracle than a reminder that a life stolen for study demanded recognition? From a scientific perspective, theories persisted. Some suggested crystallized salts embedded in the wax, drawn out by fluctuations in humidity. Others argued that the glass eyes were imperfectly sealed, allowing microcondensation. Yet none could explain the salt concentration, nor the synchronicity with dates in Delacroix's journal. Science supplied fragments, but never the whole. Philosophers of medicine took a different approach. They wrote that the wax head revealed the ethical ambiguity of 19th century anatomy. Bodies of the poor were often taken without consent, transformed into teaching tools. If one of those bodies wept through its replica, perhaps it symbolized centuries of unacknowledged suffering. In that view, The tear was not supernatural but historical, an indictment preserved in wax. Today, the head remains locked away. Its exact location within the Paris Medical Archives is not disclosed to the public. A curator I spoke with only said, "It is safer where it cannot be seen." Yet rumors persist that staff occasionally find faint salt traces on the vault shelf, as if the head continues to release its protest, drop by drop. What lingers is not simply the mystery of chemistry versus haunting, but the recognition that matter can carry memory. The wax head blurs boundaries between art and body, between preservation and violation, between teaching aid and ghost. Whether one interprets the tears as trick of environment or as residue of soul, the effect on witnesses was the same, an overwhelming sense of being seen by something that should be inert. And so the story endures, whispered among students who inherit the faculty's halls. A sealed crate, a tear that could not be explained, a craftsman who felt watched by his own creation, and a young woman whose likeness endured beyond her grave. The case is closed, the evidence filed. But the question remains, what do we awaken when we preserve the image of the dead too faithfully? The attic where it was found has since been emptied, but those who were there in 1993 still recall the dust, the burlap, the first sight of lashes in torchlight. They admit they sometimes dream of that face, waiting in silence. It seems the relic has not only outlived its maker, but also lodged itself in the minds of those who touched it, ensuring that, in memory if not in display, it continues to watch. You've just heard the true account of a relic that should never have wept. Subscribe now and join us to uncover the next forgotten dread.